He had been on the road for days, riding across quiet fields with nothing but the sound of his horse's slow steps to keep him company. The mornings were the hardest. That was when memories of his late wife returned the strongest, slipping into his thoughts before he had the strength to push them away. He tried not to think about the life he once had, but grief has its own way of following a person, no matter how far he travels. On this morning the air felt different, softer, colder. A faint fog rested on the ground and the rising sun cast long shadows across the grass. He walked toward his horse to start the day, expecting the same silent routine. But as he got closer, he paused. His horse wasn't alone. Someone was lying there in the grass, curled up right beside the animal, almost like she had been seeking warmth or comfort. At first, he thought it might be someone injured, a traveler who had collapsed on the road. But as he stepped forward, he noticed the shape more clearly. A young woman, still, exhausted. Her clothes were damp with night air and her face looked pale from lack of sleep. His heart tightened. It had been a long time since he had found anyone near him, much less someone sleeping this close to his horse. People usually stayed away from strangers out here. It wasn't safe to trust anyone too quickly. He took a careful breath and moved slowly, not wanting to startle her. He thought about waking her gently, maybe offering water or some food. But before he could reach out, he heard something that made him freeze in place. A whisper. At first he thought it was only the wind brushing through her hair, but then it came again, faint but clear. She was murmuring a name in her sleep, a name he knew better than any other, a name he had not heard spoken aloud by another person in a long, long time. His late wife's name. Every muscle in his body went still. The sound felt like a ghost passing through him, stirring the ache he had tried so hard to bury. He stared at the young woman, unsure whether he should step closer or step back. The world around him seemed to hold its breath. Who was she? Why was she here? And how, after all this time, did she know that name? He waited, torn between fear, disbelief, and a strange pull he couldn't explain. He stood there, staring at the young widow who slept beside his horse, but his mind was no longer in the present. Hearing his late wife's name had pulled him backward, into memories he had tried for months to bury. He had once believed time would soften the pain. People told him grief fades slowly, like a candle burning down. But his grief never burned down. It stayed bright, sharp, and alive. It clung to him in the quiet moments, especially in the mornings before the sun had fully risen. He remembered the day he lost her. It was a day he wished he could erase, yet it stayed with him like a scar beneath his ribs. She had fallen ill without warning, the kind of illness that doctors shook their heads at, the kind that steals a person faster than anyone can understand. He sat beside her bed for nights that felt like years, holding her trembling hand, whispering promises he hoped she could hear. And then one morning her hand went still, just like that. She slipped away while the rest of the world continued moving as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed for him. After she passed, their home became unbearable. Every corner held a memory. Every object reminded him of her voice, her laugh, her quiet presence. Even the smell of morning tea made his chest tighten. Eventually, he locked the doors, saddled his horse, and left. He didn't know where he was going. He only knew he couldn't stay. The road felt safer than the rooms that echoed her absence. He became a wanderer, a man who avoided towns and people. He stopped speaking unless he had to. Silence became his companion, and his horse became the only soul he trusted. The road showed him new places, but none of them felt like anything except temporary. He slept under open skies, ate simple meals, and rarely stayed in one place long enough to remember its name. He told himself he preferred it this way, but deep down he knew the truth. He was running. Running from memories, running from pain, running from the fear that he would never feel whole again. Some nights he dreamed of her. In those dreams she smiled like she always did, soft and warm. In the dreams she talked to him as if nothing had happened, as if she were just in the next room. But every time he woke up, the emptiness beside him felt colder. He carried her memory like a weight he could not set down. That was the life he had built for himself. A life of wandering, of empty paths and quiet sunsets. A life where no one knew his story and he had no reason to share it. So finding someone lying beside his horse was strange enough. But hearing that name, her name, felt impossible. It hit him so deeply that for a moment he wondered if he was still asleep, dreaming one of those painful dreams again. But the cold morning air was real. The dampness of the grass beneath his boots was real. The soft breath of his horse was real. And the young widow resting in the dirt was real. She wasn't someone from his memories. She wasn't a voice from his dreams. She was a stranger, someone who had somehow spoken the name he guarded so tightly inside him. He felt his heartbeat quicken. Part of him wanted to turn away, get back on his horse, and ride until the image of her faded behind him. But another part, stronger and more curious, kept him frozen. How could she know that name? What possible connection could there be between this fragile stranger and the woman he had loved? The thought didn't make sense. Nothing about this moment made sense. He took a slow breath, trying to ground himself. His horse nudged the woman gently, almost as if sensing something important. The man watched her, noticing details he hadn't seen before. Her clothes were worn but clean, suggesting she wasn't living on the road for long. Her hands were scraped as if she had fallen recently. Her hair was tangled, and there were dark circles beneath her eyes. She looked like someone who had been running too, running from something painful, something heavy. He wondered what her story was. No one sleeps beside a stranger's horse unless they are desperate. No one whispers another woman's name in their dreams unless there is some buried connection. He felt a strange mixture of caution and concern. He didn't want to feel anything for anyone. Caring had become dangerous. Caring had led to heartbreak once before. But something about this woman stirred a feeling he couldn't quite name, something between fear and recognition. He tried to calm his thoughts, but his mind kept returning to the past. He remembered the last words his wife spoke to him, spoken with faint breath and tired eyes. She told him to keep living, to find peace, to let himself be happy again someday. At the time, he couldn't imagine any of that. Happiness felt impossible, peace felt unreachable, and living felt like something he was only pretending to do. Yet here he was, standing over a stranger who had somehow spoken the one name he thought the world had forgotten. Was it a coincidence? A sign? A moment of fate? He didn't believe in signs, and he certainly didn't believe fate had any interest in him. But still, he couldn't ignore the feeling rising inside him. Something was happening, something strange and unexpected. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to stay calm. He needed answers. He needed to understand who she was, where she came from, and how she knew that name. He waited for her to wake, unsure of what he might learn, unsure of what this moment would bring. But one thing was clear. His quiet, lonely journey was about to change, whether he was ready for it or not. The young widow didn't wake right away, and for a moment he simply watched her, trying to piece together the puzzle she represented. The early sun touched her face, revealing faint lines of worry etched into her features. She was young, yes, but grief had a way of aging a person faster than time ever could. He recognized that look because he saw it every morning in his own reflection. It was the look of someone who had carried a burden far too heavy for far too long. His horse shifted its weight and let out a soft huff, but didn't move away from her. That alone surprised him. His horse normally shied from strangers, especially when startled awake. But here, the animal stood still, calm, almost protective. It was as if the horse sensed something in her, something gentle, something broken, something familiar. The man took a small step closer, careful not to disturb her too quickly, but the rustle of the grass under his boot was enough. Her eyelids fluttered and she stirred. Her breath caught in her throat as she blinked awake, confused by her surroundings. For a second she looked ready to run. Fear flashed in her eyes, raw and bright. She scrambled back slightly, her hands pressed against the earth as if expecting danger. He raised his hands slowly, palms open, showing he meant no harm. "You're safe," he said quietly, his voice steady but gentle. He wasn't used to speaking so softly to anyone, yet it felt natural in this moment. She looked at him, her breath uneven. She took in his face, then the horse, then the empty land around them. Her shoulders dropped with relief when she realized she hadn't wandered into the camp of someone cruel or unkind. I'm sorry," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, tired. "I didn't mean to sleep here. I didn't know where else to go." He nodded once, trying to hide how unsettled he still felt, not by her presence but by the name she had spoken. He wanted to ask her immediately, but something in him held back. She looked too fragile, too worn down. Asking her outright might only frighten her more. "Were you hurt?" he asked instead, keeping his tone calm. She shook her head, though the motion seemed uncertain. "Just tired," she said. "I walked longer than I should have." He noticed the way she cradled one of her hands as if hiding a fresh injury. Her clothes were dusty, her shoes nearly worn through. She had clearly traveled far and fast and not with proper supplies. He wondered what drove her to such a desperate state. People didn't wander alone like this unless they were escaping something or someone. She swallowed, her gaze drifting back to the horse. "I'm sorry about lying so close to him. I didn't mean to startle you." "He doesn't seem bothered," the man said. "If anything, he likes you." A weak, tired smile touched her lips. It wasn't happiness. It was more like relief. Relief that someone wasn't yelling at her, threatening her, or turning her away. She looked as though the world hadn't offered her kindness in a long time. Then, as she tried to push herself fully upright, she winced. The man stepped forward instinctively, but stopped himself before he got too close. She steadied herself and brushed dirt from her dress, though the gesture did little to improve its condition. "You've been traveling alone?" he asked. She hesitated but nodded. "For days, that isn't safe." "I know," she whispered, her voice cracking, "but I didn't have a choice." Her eyes shifted away as if hiding the truth. He didn't press her yet. People only traveled in desperation when their past offered them no shelter. "You should have camped farther from the road," he said, trying to keep his voice neutral. "Sleeping out in the open can get you into trouble." "I thought the horse would scare away anyone who meant harm," she admitted. He blinked in surprise. Of all the reasons he expected, that wasn't one. "Why my horse?" he asked gently. She looked at him then, and something in her gaze changed. It softened, deepened, almost as if she recognized something in him. "I didn't know he was yours," she confessed. I felt safe near him, I don't know why." He felt a strange twist in his stomach. She wasn't lying. Her voice was too genuine, too fragile to be anything but truth. But still, he wasn't prepared for what came next. She brushed a strand of hair from her face, and her expression turned thoughtful, almost distant. "I must have fallen asleep without meaning to," she murmured. "I had a dream, a strange dream. I thought I heard someone calling to me." She swallowed, her eyes clouding. "A woman's voice." He felt a chill run through him but stayed silent, letting her speak. "She said a name," the widow whispered softly. "A name I haven't heard in years. I don't even know why it came to me in my sleep." His heart hammered in his chest. He wanted to look away, but couldn't. She lifted her eyes to his, and her next words fell like stones in the quiet morning air. She whispered the name Lena, his late wife's name. Hearing it from her lips, not murmured in sleep but spoken awake, sent a cold rush through him. He tried to control his breathing, tried to steady the wave of emotion rising inside him. She didn't know. She couldn't know. The widow noticed his reaction. Confusion filled her eyes. Why does that name matter to you?" He opened his mouth, but no words came. She took a small step toward him, fear and curiosity mixing across her face. "Please," she said softly, "tell me. Who is Lena to you?" He stared at her, uncertain whether fate was playing a cruel trick, or whether something far deeper had brought this stranger onto his path. He didn't answer her right away. Part of him couldn't. Hearing his late wife's name spoken so clearly, by a stranger, by someone who had no connection to his life, shook him in a way he wasn't prepared for. The young widow stood there, waiting, her hands trembling slightly as she held them together. She looked like someone bracing for a truth she wasn't sure she wanted to hear. Finally, he drew a slow breath. "Lena was my wife," he said, his voice low. She passed some time ago. The widow's eyes softened with sympathy, but the confusion remained. She lowered her gaze, nodding as if trying to understand how a dream could have led her to speak the name of a woman she had never met. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to bring up something painful." He shook his head once. "You didn't know." But even as he spoke, his mind kept racing. How could she have dreamed of Lena? Why now? Why out here of all places? The road had given him many strange moments, but nothing like this. The widow wrapped her arms around herself, as if trying to hold her thoughts together. "There's something I should tell you," she said softly. "But I don't know if you'll believe me." Her voice carried the weight of someone who had been doubted many times before. He didn't interrupt. He simply waited, watching her carefully as she tried to gather her courage. "My name is Mara," she said, "and I wasn't always alone. I had a husband too. His name was Jonah." The man stayed silent, letting her speak at her own pace. "We lived in a small town," she continued, her voice tightening. "Quiet, peaceful. Jonah was kind, patient. He worked long hours, but he always made time for me. We were happy." A faint, sad smile touched her lips for a moment before fading again. But one night he didn't come home. A storm had come through. People searched for him the next day and the day after, but they never found him. Her voice cracked slightly. Some said he must have gotten lost in the storm. Others said he fell into the river. But no one was sure. The pain in her voice mirrored the pain in his own memories. He understood that kind of loss, the kind that comes without warning, leaving behind more questions than answers. "After Jonah disappeared," she said, swallowing hard, "I tried to move on. I tried to live as he would have wanted. But it felt like everything kept falling apart. Our home filled with silence. My days felt empty. And then something strange happened." She paused, her hands clenching. "One night I found a letter addressed to Jonah. I don't know how it got there. No one had been in the house. I swear I checked everywhere. But it was sitting right on our table as if someone placed it there quietly." The man narrowed his eyes. "A letter? From who?" Mara hesitated. "It had no sender's name. Just a message inside." She reached carefully into the pocket of her dress. Her fingers trembled as she pulled out a small, folded piece of paper that had clearly been handled many times. "I've been carrying this ever since," she said. She held it out, but he didn't take it yet. Instead, he asked, "What does it say?" Mara looked down at the letter, her voice barely above a whisper. "It mentions a woman named Lena." The world seemed to tilt around him for a moment. He took a step closer, unable to stop himself. "How do you know that name?" he asked. "That's just it," she said. "I didn't. I had never heard it before. Jonah never mentioned anyone named Lena. We didn't know anyone with that name in our town. But the letter, it talked about her like she was someone important, someone Jonah had promised to help." The man felt his heartbeat quicken. Lena had been kind, generous, and constantly helping others in quiet ways he didn't always understand. It wasn't impossible that she had crossed paths with Jonah. But why would she write to him? And why would the letter appear after Jonah had vanished? Mara took a shaky breath. It said that Lena had something she wanted to tell Jonah, something she couldn't share before she passed. He felt the breath catch in his chest. What did she want to tell him? Mara lowered her eyes. The letter didn't say. It only said Jonah would understand when he met the man on the road, a man traveling with a horse that carried the mark of a crescent on its bridle. His horse's bridle. That exact symbol. The one his wife had carved for him as a gift on their last anniversary. A silence stretched between them, heavy and alive. Mara looked frightened, as if the pieces she carried were finally aligning in a way she didn't expect. "When I read that," she whispered, "I didn't know what it meant. I didn't even believe it. But after Jonah disappeared, I kept getting the same dream. A voice telling me to find the man with the crescent horse. The voice said his name was important, but I could never hear it clearly." Her eyes lifted to his slowly. "Last night was the first time the voice was clear. She said the name Lena. And when I woke up this morning, I saw your horse. I thought, maybe this is where I'm meant to stop. Maybe this is where the answers are." He felt the wind move across the grass, cool against his skin. Every instinct inside him told him this moment wasn't coincidence. Not this woman, not this letter, not the dreams. Something was unfolding between their two broken worlds. Something neither of them fully understood yet. And Mara, clutching the letter against her chest, looked like she had been waiting a very long time to finally hand it to him. He took the letter from Mara with careful hands, as if it were something fragile, something alive. The paper felt worn, the edges softened from being folded and unfolded many times. Mara watched him closely, her breath unsteady, as if she feared what might happen once he read it. He didn't open it yet. Instead, he turned it over slowly, examining every detail. The handwriting on the outside was unmistakable. It was Lena's. His chest tightened. He hadn't seen her handwriting in so long that he almost forgot how delicate and steady it was. Seeing it now, out here on an empty road with a stranger watching him, felt surreal, painful, beautiful. His fingers trembled as memories rushed back. Notes she used to leave him, lists she wrote for the house, the final words she penned before she became too weak to hold a pen. He forced himself to breathe. "This is her writing," he said quietly. Mara nodded, swallowing. "I thought you might recognize it." "How did you get this?" he asked. "I told you it appeared in my house. I didn't see anyone come in. I didn't hear a door. It was just there." She hesitated. "The truth is, I don't understand how any of this happened. I only know it felt wrong to ignore it." He stared at her for a moment, trying to read her expression. She wasn't lying. Her eyes held too much sincerity, too much exhaustion, for her story to be invented. Whatever had brought this letter into her life had also pushed her onto a road she never planned to walk. Finally, he unfolded the letter. The ink was slightly faded but still clear. He braced himself and began to read. Mara stayed silent, watching him with anxious eyes as his gaze moved across the page. His face tightened. His breath grew shallow. Words from his wife, words he had never seen before, filled his mind, each one landing with the weight of a stone in his heart. After a long moment, he lowered the paper. He didn't speak right away. Mara bit her lip, almost afraid to break the silence. What did she say?" she asked gently. He looked at her, and the emotion in his eyes made her step back slightly. "She wrote this shortly before she passed," he said. "I didn't know she wrote anything at that time." "What does it say?" He held the letter against his chest for a moment, then spoke carefully, as though repeating something sacred. "She said she knew she didn't have much time left, and she wanted to make peace with things she had kept to herself. She wrote that she had met a man named Jonah while traveling years before she married me. She said he was kind to her, helped her when she was lost during a storm." Mara's eyes widened. "Jonah, she really wrote his name?" "Yes, she mentioned him by name." He glanced at her, seeing the shock bloom on her face. "She said Jonah told her something that stayed with her entire life." "What was it?" Mara whispered. He hesitated, then continued. "She wrote that Jonah told her every loss we suffer leads us towards someone we are meant to help. That pain is not the end of the path, it is a turning point, guiding us to people who need us just as much as we need them." Mara blinked back tears. "Jonah used to say that to me too. He said it after my father passed. He said someday our grief would help someone else." Her voice broke. "I thought he just said it to comfort me." The man nodded slowly. "Lena said it changed how she saw life. She wanted to thank him, but she never got the chance." He paused. "She wrote that if Jonah ever needed help, she hoped fate would guide him to someone who could be there for him." Mara's breath caught. She took a step back, shaking her head. "But that doesn't explain why the letter came to me after Jonah disappeared. Why me? Why now?" He looked down at the letter again, reading the final lines silently before speaking. "She wrote that if Jonah ever found himself lost, the path would eventually lead someone else to finish what she couldn't. She didn't know who that person would be. She only wrote that they would be connected by loss." Mara pressed her hand to her mouth. Her shoulders trembled. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind picked up, rustling the grass around them. It was as though the world itself paused to absorb what the letter meant. Finally, Mara whispered, "So, Lena wrote this, hoping to help Jonah. But Jonah never received it, and then he disappeared." Tears gathered in her eyes. "And now the letter reached you, not him." The man lowered the letter, his voice gentle. "Maybe the letter wasn't meant for Jonah anymore." Mara closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Then who was it meant for?" He didn't answer immediately, because the truth was forming slowly, carefully, inside him. He saw the exhaustion in Mara's face, the grief she had carried alone, the way her voice trembled when she mentioned Jonah's kindness, her loneliness, her fear, her bravery in following a whisper and a dream. He saw in her what he saw in himself. "Maybe," he said softly, "it was meant for the one Jonah left behind." Mara stared at him, stunned. She parted her lips to speak, but no words came out. He continued gently, "Maybe Lena wanted you to know you weren't alone. Maybe the letter was meant to find you, so it could lead you to someone who understands the same kind of loss." Mara trembled, not with fear, but with the weight of something that felt bigger than both of them. "And maybe," he added, his voice quiet, "that's why you dreamed of her, why you spoke her name." Mara looked at him with wide, tear-filled eyes. The letter, the dream, the road, none of it felt random anymore. Something had woven their paths together long before either of them realized it. And now, standing there with the morning sun rising behind them, they both began to sense it. They were connected in a way that neither loss nor time could erase. Mara stood very still, as if the world around her had suddenly grown quieter. The letter trembled between her fingers, and the man could see her struggling to steady her breath. Something in her eyes shifted, like she was trying to understand not just the words he'd spoken, but the meaning behind them. She looked lost, but not in the same way she had been when she first woke beside his horse. This was different. This was a search for understanding, for grounding, for a truth that felt too large to grasp all at once. He didn't rush her. He didn't step closer or look away. He simply gave her the space she needed to breathe, knowing that what she carried inside her was heavy. He knew that weight well. It was the same weight he had carried since Lena's passing, the same weight that had turned him into a wanderer on lonely roads. Finally, Mara let out a slow, shaky breath. "I thought I was losing my mind," she admitted softly. "When the letter appeared, when the dream started, when I kept seeing Jonah's face every time I tried to sleep." She pressed her hand to her forehead, as if wiping away a thought she didn't want to feel. "But something kept pushing me forward. Something told me I wasn't supposed to hide anymore." He nodded. "Grief has a way of pushing us in directions we don't expect." "It does more than that," she whispered. "It follows us. It teaches us things we don't want to learn." Her voice quivered. She turned away for a moment, facing the open land as if the horizon held answers she didn't yet have. The sky stretched wide and pale, hinting at a long day ahead. The road behind her seemed impossibly far now, a path filled with fear, exhaustion, and loneliness. But the path in front of her, she didn't know what lay there, only that she wasn't standing on it alone anymore. "I didn't think I would ever speak to someone like this again," she said, her voice softer now. "After Jonah disappeared, I pushed people away. I stopped trusting strangers. I stopped trusting myself. And when the dreams started, I thought they were just reminders of everything I lost." He listened, his own memories rising like a tide. The nights he spent staring at the sky, asking questions to a world that never answered. The times he woke up expecting to find Lena beside him, only to face the emptiness again. Loss had carved both of them into quieter versions of who they once were. Mara turned back to him. "But now, standing here, it feels like I'm finally where I was meant to be. I don't know why, I don't know how, but meeting you, it doesn't feel like an accident." He looked at her with calm eyes. "I've been alone for a long time too," he said. "Longer than I care to admit. And I didn't think anything could pull me out of that. But the moment I heard you say her name, I knew something was different." She took a small step closer, not in fear this time, but in understanding. "I wasn't supposed to deliver this letter just to Jonah," she murmured, almost to herself. "I was supposed to bring it to you." A silence settled between them, not empty, but full. Full of memories, full of pain, full of a strange sense of clarity that neither of them could explain. His horse shifted beside them, letting out a gentle snort, as if urging them forward. Mara brushed a tear from her cheek and drew in a steadier breath. "What do we do now?" she asked quietly. He folded the letter carefully and placed it inside his coat. The gesture felt final, like marking the end of one chapter and the uncertain beginning of another. "You're tired," he said. "You haven't eaten. You've been walking alone for too long." He motioned toward the quiet stretch of road ahead. "If you'd like, you can travel with me for a while, at least until you find where you want to go next." Mara looked down, her fingers twisting nervously for a moment before she met his gaze again. "I don't know where I'm going," she confessed. "I've been walking without direction, without anything to hold on to." He understood better than she realized. "Then stay with me until you do," he offered. Her eyes softened. "Are you sure?" "I am," he said simply. "No one should walk alone if they don't have to." For a moment she didn't speak. She looked at him, really looked at him, seeing not just a stranger but someone carrying the same shadows she carried. Someone marked by loss. Someone touched by fate in a way she couldn't ignore. Finally, she nodded. "All right," she whispered. He helped her gather her things, though she had very few, and offered her a place to sit as he prepared the horse. She moved slowly, her steps still uncertain, but her eyes held a new kind of steadiness. The kind that comes when a heart begins to shift from surviving to healing. As they started down the road together, the morning breeze brushed gently against their faces. The world felt different now. Not lighter, but more meaningful. Their losses still lived inside them, but now those losses walked side by side instead of alone. And though neither of them said it aloud, they both felt something quietly growing between them. Something shaped not by romance or expectation, but by understanding. Two wandering souls had collided on an empty road, guided by a letter written by a woman who was gone, delivered by a man who had been lost, and carried by a widow searching for peace. They walked forward not as strangers anymore, but as two people who finally realized what Jonah and Lena had meant all along. Grief doesn't end the story. Sometimes it begins a new one.